With the NFL draft over and dynasty values shaken up all over the place, it's time to run through our dynasty rankings once again. So today, we're going to be running through my top 60 overall running backs for dynasty fantasy football. So at the top in tier 1, I might make some people mad about this order, but for me, the top 3 dynasty running backs are Bijan Robinson, Ashton Jeanty, then Jahmyr Gibbs. The reason why Jahmyr Gibbs is RB3 is simply because he is not a bell cow in his offense. Bijan had 360 touches last year. Jeanty will probably be well over 300 as well with absolutely zero competition in Vegas. Gibbs did have 302 touches last year, but that's primarily because of what he did over the last 3 weeks of the season without David Montgomery. When David Montgomery was healthy from weeks 1 through 14, Gibbs was on pace for only 277 touches. He was the RB6 in PPR points per game through those weeks and totaled only 3 20-plus point games. For reference, Bijan was the RB5 in points per game, averaging almost an entire extra fantasy point per game and had 7 20-plus point games. I don't want to value Gibbs as if Monty isn't there because he very much is going to be and will continue to be involved and scoring touchdowns. It is fantastic to know that Jahmyr Gibbs' ceiling is absolutely game-breaking for fantasy without David Montgomery, but he's just not a better fantasy producer than Bijan or my projection of Ashton Jeanty when everybody is absolutely 100% healthy. Now in tier 2, we have Omarion Hampton, Devon Etienne, and Jonathan Taylor. Hampton is of course just a 100% projection as a rookie. We've never seen him play an NFL snap, but I believe very strongly in him as a player, as a talent, the landing spot, the situation, the first round draft capital, everything is there for Omarion Hampton. In fact, since 2015, there are only 8 running backs with a final grade of 80 or better in my marker system. Todd Gurley, Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne, Bijan Robinson, and now Ashton Jeanty and Omarion Hampton in the 2025 class. That is the type of prospect that Hampton is, and the production that I expect from him pretty much immediately in year 1, even while splitting some with Najee Harris, but then from 2026 on, it is just entirely his show. Now, Devon Etienne is an interesting story, though. We have immense efficiency and highly explosive plays that we saw in 2023, but he did deal with some injuries. Then in 2024, we have pretty crazy volume, including almost 80 receptions, totaling 1,500 yards, 12 total touchdowns, while playing all 17 games, and that is including the games that Tua missed, which I'm sure everybody knows the splits with and without Tua. 8.5 PPR points per game without Tua, 22.5 PPR points per game with Tua. That is insane production. The only question is, can Tua stay healthy? Because that really is just the major Achilles heel for this team, is that we not only have to fear for the individual players' health, but we also have to fear for Tua's. I do think that Zach Wilson and maybe even Quinn Ewers are better backups than anything that they had last year, but we all still just want Tua to play 17. That's what's best for the offense and best for all the fantasy players involved, and that kind of seems like a lot to ask these days. But at least for Devon Etienne himself, I love the receiving volume that he got last year that hopefully stays in 2025, and then maybe we get some of those big runs that we saw in 2023 that we didn't really get in 2024. So it's a nice marriage of the 2 seasons, and he just continues to be an elite top 5 fantasy producer. And then we know who Jonathan Taylor is. He is an elite talent with fantastic production for fantasy as a point per game RB1 in all but 1 season of his career, and a total points RB1 in 3 out of his 5 seasons. He's still under contract for 2 more years through 2026, and he's the engine for the Colts offense with pretty much zero competition for touches. So he's a pretty easy rank here at RB6. Then in what I'm calling tier 2B, essentially, because I don't really know where else to put him, is then Saquon Barkley. This is where a lot of the nuance and strategy of Dynasty really starts to come into play for running backs, because Saquon could be immensely valuable to some of your teams in your league, or kind of not valuable at all to others just because of his age, especially if they're not ready to compete. If I was drafting a startup right now, I would draft about 10 other running backs before I drafted Saquon Barkley. But in already established leagues, and especially if you are a competing team this year, Saquon is probably a top 3, top 4 running back for that team, and the only way that you trade him is for somebody in tier 1. So his value is just completely subjective to the direction of the team who has him or the team that wants to buy him in your league. And I can tell you that this vacuum ranking of RB6 is probably not very indicative of his current market price. It's probably actually above his current market price in trades because of his age. Heading into tier 3, we round out the top 12 with 3 very good veterans and then 2 rookies. We got Kyren Williams, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, TreVeyon Henderson, and Quinshon Judkins. Honestly, this whole entire tier is probably up for debate, and if you ask 10 different people to rank these 5 guys, you'd probably get 10 different answers, or whatever the actual number is for whatever the different number of combinations for 5 guys actually is. Anyway, Kyren Williams is still an easy rank for me. He's 24 years old. He's turning 25 this year. He's been a fantastic producer as the RB7 overall in total points in back-to-back seasons, putting up 1,300 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns this last year with a modest receiving baseline of a couple catches per game, which is also very nice. I know he's on the last year of his contract and now might not even get an extension this summer, but the franchise tag could be in play next year or a smaller extension at some point this season too. I'm putting my trust into Kyren Williams himself being in this Rams offense. Sean McVay absolutely loves him. And I mean, we tried to kill Kyren last summer when they drafted Blake Corum. Then he had a better season statistically than he did in 2023, and now we're trying to kill him again, and I think it's just unwise to fade a top 10 fantasy running back as we head into 2025. Maybe this is a blind spot for me, and I am just being slow to react to a very changing situation right now with this Rams offense, and maybe Kyren Williams is just Travis Etienne 2.0, but I just think that Kyren Williams is good, man, and I don't want to fade him anymore. I'm just happy to have him on my team, and I want that production. Now, in a very similar vein is Chase Brown, who is actually already 25 years old, which is older than Kyren Williams, but he survived the NFL draft, as he honestly should have. Brown was amazing last year as the bell cow for the Bengals, and even with Zach Moss back, drafting Taj Brooks in the 7th round, I just don't really care. Chase Brown is also just a good running back, and it's one of the best offenses in the NFL. Just enjoy the production in 2025. That could also very easily be there in 2026 on his final year of his contract. To me, Brown is just last year's version of Kyren Williams, and he might be in for an even bigger 2025 than his 2024. And once again, another day 3 pick with tremendous production. We get to Bucky Irving. At least with Bucky, there are some easier pills to swallow here despite his day 3 draft capital. He is 22 years old, so he's 2+ years younger than Kyren and Chase Brown. He's entering his 2nd year, so he has 3 years left on his rookie contract, counting 2025. So there's ideally 1 extra season of status quo before contract talks really start weighing over his dynasty value. And he's also in a tremendous offense, just like the Rams, just like the Bengals, that he should just continue building on what he did to end the year last year. Then for the Ohio State rookies, both of them landed in great situations for their skill sets with great draft capital. TreVeyon can grow as part of this new Patriots offense and grow into that RB1 role throughout the year. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he had a kind of J.K. Dobbins type rookie season, which was moderately involved for the first 4 to 6 weeks, then a nice uptick as we get into late October and into November, and then post-bye for the final 5 games for J.K. Dobbins was fantastic. He paced for 1,500 yards, 20 total touchdowns over that stretch, and was a massive dynasty value riser heading into year 2. TreVeyon honestly could even be better than that with more receiving work than what J.K. Dobbins got. Plus, we get the week-to-week progression with second half burst. That's probably what we're looking at for this year for TreVeyon Henderson, and I love that as an immediate dynasty RB1. Judkins, I think, slides into immediate work as the Browns RB1 from week 1. Their new Nick Chubb, honestly, for this offense. I don't think that he gets a ton of receiving work. That really wasn't his forte in college, and Nick Chubb himself never really caught more than like 20 to 25 passes a season either, but we get the rushing volume. The touchdowns should all be there for Quinshon Judkins. I don't think that he has like top 5 fantasy upside just due to a projected lack of receiving work, but he is a very solid top 15 guy with top 10 upside from touchdowns or just rushing efficiency in general. Now, I can understand if anyone prefers these 2 rookies over any of the 3 veterans ahead of them because of the draft capital investment and the 4-year rookie deals that we get versus the 1, 2, and 3 years left for the other guys. But if you're looking at just 2025, maybe even into 2026, I would bet that the veterans outproduce the rookie. So again, it depends on the direction of your team and who fits that direction best. Now, tier 4 is a simple tier of just 2 players. It is Chuba Hubbard and Breece Hall. And yes, in that order. I would love to rank Breece Hall higher. I really honestly would, but he has fallen hard in my rankings and my personal viewpoint from even just a few months ago to right now. I don't love that Justin Fields is there, especially if he's not going to check it down to Breece Hall, which was really Hall's only saving grace last year with Aaron Rodgers was all the receiving work that he got. And if Fields is going to steal red zone touches, that's not good for Breece Hall either. I really just want Breece to be traded to Dallas. It would just be so easy because then he can be the bell cow in that Dallas offense. Braylon Allen can then be very fantasy relevant as the RB1 in New York. It's just so easy. I mean, what can we do to just make that happen? Now, as for Chuba, he was in a video of mine before the NFL draft as a major buy low / tiered down to candidate because he will be the workhorse again in 2025. And no, I do not care about Rico Dowdle or Trevor Etienne. Both of these guys have minimal investments into them as depth pieces behind Chuba because they lost Miles Sanders and Jonathan Brooks is hurt again, not competing with Chuba at all directly. So please stop with any of that nonsense immediately. I just see no reason why Chuba can't just repeat his 2024 season or even improve upon it as the full-time starter from week 1. He didn't become the true starter last year until week 4, and then from then on was on pace for nearly 1,600 total yards and 14 touchdowns on a 4-win Panther team. Imagine if Carolina improves just a little bit this year with a better Bryce Young. You got Tech McMillan in here now, and then Chuba Hubbard is driving the offense. If they can be a 6, 7, or even an 8-win team this year, that's better for Chuba in terms of scoring opportunities and maybe even volume with more sustained drives. And if he's asked to close more games out instead of them trying to come back and having to throw more. And the whole reason that I have Chuba ahead of Breece Hall is just simply because I trust Chuba more than Breece for 2025. I have no idea what 2026 means for either guy. Honestly, Chuba's the only one under contract for 2026. Breece could just be in a worse or even a similar situation again next year on a new team. But for 2025 only, if you ask me who I would rather have for a redraft team, who am I more confident in? It's Chuba Hubbard. It really is Chuba Hubbard, and that's why he gets the nod for me ahead of Breece Hall, even in Dynasty rankings. Now, I'm just going to run through tiers 5 and 7 because they are both tiers of older veterans. They're just split into 2 tiers based on how elite their production is over the next really 1 to 2 years. Tier 5 are the 3 elite 1 to 2 year rentals for 2025 and then probably 2026 in Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs, and Derrick Henry. Now, tier 7 is pretty much just the rest of the 1-year rentals who maybe you're lucky and get a second year out of them in 2026, but really tier 7 is 2025 only, who are also not as productive as the guys in tier 5. It's Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery, Joe Mixon, James Conner, Tony Pollard, Brian Robinson, DeAndre Swift, and Aaron Jones. I really don't think I need to go into any detail on anyone in either tier. Everybody knows who they are, and if you prefer someone over another within each tier, then that's completely fine by me. But I don't think that anyone in tier 7 deserves to be in tier 5. Maybe you could argue Alvin Kamara, but that offense is just so bad, and now we probably have a new rookie quarterback coming in. I mean, I like Kamara a lot for 2025, and if you need a cheap veteran as a contender, I would start with Alvin Kamara, but I don't think that he's quite worth the same as Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs, or Derrick Henry, and I'm not as confident in top 5 production upside for Kamara as I am with those 3. I do also have Travis Etienne and Isaiah Pacheco appended to the end of tier 7 in what I'm just calling tier 7B. I honestly don't really know where to put them at all because I could see both of them being the RB1s for their teams this year, returning to kind of that 2023 role and production for both of their respective offenses. But I would also believe you if you told me that a year from now, they both just got Thanos snapped out of their offenses and are worth next to nothing in 2026. So they're in this weird value void right now that is entirely dependent upon what they do in 25 or really the first month of 2025. Now, skipping back to tier 6, though, are the 4 guys dividing the aging veterans that if you are competing, I would prefer the guys in tier 5, but I want anybody in tier 6 over guys in tier 7. It's Kenneth Walker, James Cook, Kaleb Johnson, and RJ Harvey. Kenneth Walker is pretty much on his last life here in 2025. If he doesn't put something together that's not different than what we've seen the last 3 years, I don't really know what Kenneth Walker is going to be. I could see him getting traded this year. I could see him walk in free agency next year, sign with a new team. I could see him have a great year with Seattle and re-sign as their RB1 for the next 2 to 3 more years. The only thing standing in Kenneth Walker's way is and has been Kenneth Walker. I really do think that he's set up for a great 2025. He'll have the RB1 workload that he had all last year with 15 carries a game plus 3 to 4 receptions per game, which is also great to see. The red zone usage is there, and this team might honestly rely on him more now without DK Metcalf, without Tyler Lockett, and with a new quarterback in a new offense that just used Alvin Kamara to the fullest extent for fantasy last year. I do think if Walker plays 15 plus games this year, that he is a top 10 fantasy running back. We just need him to play 15 or more games. Moving on to James Cook then. This is low for James Cook. I 100% get that. It is 6 spots lower than his keep trade cut value, but I'm just not a James Cook dude. He scored 18 touchdowns last year and was the RB11 in PPR points per game. He barely broke 1,000 yards. He barely caught more than 30 receptions. And sure, he sat out most fourth quarters because Buffalo was just smacking people left and right, but I just don't think that Cook is super important to Buffalo's success, and I think that they could throw almost any running back there, and they'd have very similar success to what James Cook has had over the past couple of years. And you want to talk about contract situation with Kyren Williams and Chase Brown? Well, James Cook is also on the final year of his deal, and there is no extension in sight. So what if he walks in free agency and signs somewhere else to not really be the RB1 on a new team? I don't think that he's a player that can ever break into the top 10 of Dynasty value, nor has the production upside to warrant him being any higher than this. He's just a fine RB2, but I can get a fine RB2 from 10 other guys, some maybe even cheaper in Dynasty, and also come with potentially more production, a la Alvin Kamara or James Conner. Cook is young, he's in a good offense now, and he carries enough name value that I'm fine holding on to him as a contender, but he just doesn't feel like anything special to be higher than RB19 for me. Then at the back end of this tier, we have the 2 rookies. Very similar discussions as we had for the Ohio State guys, just at a kind of lower level. I do have Kaleb ranked higher. That is just me being consistent with my pre-draft evals, and Kaleb is literally a perfect running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He will be their new Najee Harris, and he might even be better than Najee's been over the past couple of years at 25 and 26 years old versus Kaleb, who is still just 21 and will play most of 2025 at that 21 years old. I don't care about Jaylen Warren. The fantasy community has always been higher on him than Pittsburgh actually has, and drafting Kaleb Johnson proves that once again. He should be an easy RB2 this year with top 12 upside if he scores 10 or more times. Then RJ Harvey is, of course, the big NFL draft riser. He has the draft capital and the landing spot to succeed. He just needs to be their workhorse RB1, which I do expect to happen. What I don't love from a dynasty perspective is that he is 24 years old already, so a second contract is not even a real possibility. But if we're playing in 2 to 3 year windows anyway, that shouldn't really be an issue. I'm trusting Sean Payton, I'm trusting the draft capital, and I'm trusting in what I saw from RJ Harvey in college as well, that he will be good in this Broncos system, and that should translate to RB2 or even back-end RB1 fantasy numbers. Now, back down to tier 8, which is a bunch of young guys all pretty much waiting to get promoted from the kids table up to the adult table. For some, that could be in 2025. For others, that may never actually happen, but they all at least have the opportunity to grow out of this tier and are young enough that if they do grow out, they could gain some pretty serious value. So we have Cam Scadaboo, Zach Charbonnet, Trey Benson, Bayshal Tootin, Tyrone Tracy, Tyjae Spears, and Jalen Wright. Now, I don't think anybody's going to have a problem with most of the names in this tier. The order, maybe you could argue with, but I'm pretty much cool with whatever because they're all in the same tier. The one name that I do want to highlight is Jalen Wright, who was a very underrated winner from the NFL draft because it was a very clear possibility that Miami might add another running back to replace Raheem Mostert or even complement Devon Etienne as a thumper and short yardage guy. But that didn't really happen. I mean, sure, Ollie Gordon is an interesting name in the 6th round, but I think Jalen Wright was drafted to be that Mostert replacement last year, and he has a very clear path ahead of him right now to get usage with Devon Etienne, but then also be a high-quality handcuff in case Etienne gets hurt. You know, Wright's actually the RB50 on keep trade cut, which I think is shockingly low for an explosive running back who just turned 22 like a month ago, behind a running back who has shown to be kind of injury-prone over the past couple of years, and could take over what is a very valuable role for fantasy as the Dolphins RB1 if that starter ahead of him gets hurt. He might be worth seeing if you can pry him away from whoever has him for pretty much kind of cheap, like a random 3rd round rookie pick cheap or an end of bench flyer cheap, just to see if Jalen Wright can be that complement to Etienne, or if he has that kind of upside if Etienne does get hurt. Tier 9 then is just a bunch of guys who are all 25 years old or older who could have relevance in 2025, but these guys are probably on their way out in favor of names above them in the rankings. And that is Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, Rashad White, Ramondre Stevenson, Javonte Williams, Austin Eckler, and then I also added J.K. Dobbins and Nick Chubb as current free agents who could get potential value boosted if they do sign in good situations here this summer. If you have any of these guys, you're probably stuck with them for now until we get in season and maybe they produce or get the RB1 role from injuries. Then you could sell. I would note that if you are interested in buying Jalen Wright, he is ranked behind pretty much everybody in this tier on Keep Trade Cut, and I would trade everybody in this tier for Jalen Wright. And then tier 10 rounds out the top 60 and even probably goes past my top 60, but tier 10 is the primary handcuff tier. It is Tyler Algier, Isaac Guerrero, Braylon Allen, Jonathan Brooks, Jordan Mason, Ray Davis, Dylan Sampson, DJ Giddens, Marshawn Lloyd, Blake Corum, Jaden Blue, Devin Neal, Tank Bigsby, Trevor Etienne, and honestly, the list can just keep going with another handful of names or so. Really, the order of this tier does not matter because none of these guys have any real value, but this is the tier that I love hoarding anyone that I can get my hands on. If I can roster 5 or more of these guys on my teams, I am loving life because I know most of them are probably going to get a spot start at some point during the season, to which then you can either use them for their production or try to sell for profit. Again, order doesn't really matter here. Just get as many as you can to increase your odds of being positively impacted by injuries that we know are going to happen. It's just a matter of to whom. So there we have it, my current top 60 Dynasty running back rankings as we head into the summer post NFL draft. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button for Dynasty content year round on this channel. Let me know down in the comments whether you agree or disagree with any of these rankings, but we'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.